At this time in the Seder, we explain the key symbols of the Seder plate. You could also explain the other symbols at this time. We're not going to do that now because we did that in a whole other video. But at this point, you definitely explain Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. So Pesach is the shank bone, or in our case, we have a beet. You might lift it up. I'm not going to because I would get that red stuff on my hands. But the beet recalls the Passover sacrifice that would have been brought to the temple in Jerusalem. It also harkens back to the lamb's blood that was on the doorposts of the Israelites the night of the final plague. And we remember that God passed over the houses of the Israelites during that night of the final plague.
So next we have matzah, and we take out our middle matzah, the other half of which makes up the afikomen, of course. So we have our middle matzah, and we eat the matzah, of course, to remind us of how the Israelites had to leave Egypt so quickly that they didn't have time to let their bread rise. And then there's a nice little quote that I found that I like, which says, matzah is the bread of wandering, the bridge between our sojourn in the land of enslavement and the land of freedom.
Mm. It is true. You call it the bread of affliction. You also call it the bread of freedom. So I like to call it the bread of wandering. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And also matzah, unleavened bread, was traditionally eaten with sacrifices. So we just reference the sacrifice in unleavened bread. And finally, we have the maror. You may have horseradish root. Here we have prepared horseradish. And the maror reminds us of how bitter the lives of the Israelites were during the time of slavery.
And maror is fun to eat in general, but if you are inclined towards silliness, you can have a little competition to see who can eat the largest scoop or largest piece if you're using horseradish root. Another fun game is you can take some of the, if you have like the paste stuff, you can actually take it and kind of put it on the inside of your lower lip and then basically just see who gives up first. It's nonstop entertainment, especially if you're not participating and watching other people do it.
Do not do that. Disclaimer, I do not support that.
Quality. So next, B'chol dor vador, all right, which means in every generation. And so this is another kind of central theme of Seder and Passover, which is the idea of transmitting this story and really all the stories of our tradition from generation to generation. So part of what makes the Passover Seder in particular so cool with this is because there are specific elements dedicated to encouraging kids to ask questions or to be curious about what's going on. The way we retell the story and all the different parts of the Seder all are, it's kind of it hits all the different senses, and so it's a great way for kids to and adults to hear the story, to imagine the story, to kind of think about all the different themes that it brings up. We are also commanded to teach this to our children, and as in the Torah it tells us, you shall explain to your child on that day, this is what God did for me when I went free from Egypt. So yeah, it's a great opportunity to pass the tradition down to the next crew.
And to personalize it, right? That we each have to see ourselves as having come out of Egypt regardless of our generation.
Yeah, totally. And to think about how in our day and age we can, the experiences of the Israelites that we can identify with, that we can't identify with, and how that impacts us and what we think about it.
So before we have the next cup of wine, we have Hallel. Now, Hallel is the section of a prayer service that is songs of praise, and we actually have Hallel both before and after the meal. It's kind of either two Hallels or it's split into two parts. And so we wanted to give you just a taste of Hallel here. And I would say probably my favorite part of Hallel is B'tzeit Yisrael. So we're just going to sing a little tidbit of B'tzeit Yisrael at this point. B'tzeit Yisrael mi Mitzrayim Beit Yaakov me'am Moaz B'tzeit Yisrael Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov me'am Loaz. Hayta Yehuda l'kosho, Yisrael mamshelotav. Hayam rav hayanos, Hayarden yisov le'achor. B'tzeit Yisrael Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov me'am Loaz. B'tzeit Yisrael Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov me'am Loaz.
So that brings us to the second cup of wine. And the theme for this one is similar to the first. It's kind of draws from the verse of Hitzalti etchem me'avodatam, and I will deliver you from the bondage of the Egyptians. And just as God promises us deliverance, so too must we work to ensure the freedom of every human being throughout the world. And then we join together in the short Kiddush. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.